And, I brought it up again. We had talked about it, my wife and I, but I brought it up again. And she just looked at me and she said, when you're here, you're not even here.
Welcome to Husband, Father, Founder, where every week we interview successful entrepreneurs on what it's like balancing out those 3 full-time jobs. All right, awesome. Hey, Ben, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Good, dude. Well, I'm excited to kind of dive in. I think we've known each other for a long time. And I know we constantly are kind of trading notes on how we kind of balance out business ownership and working at the companies that we either have on our own or that we work at together. I think the best place to start probably is what we were talking about like right before we hopped on, which is like the sort of like origin story of start. I think every entrepreneur has that kick, where it's like, okay, I got to do something. And sometimes it's for personal reasons, sometimes it's for family reasons, but let's kind of start there. Let's like work backwards and say like, when was the time that you said, you know what, I got to do something else. I got to, do something for myself.
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually back when I was a personal trainer and yoga teacher, like 100 years ago. But it was 2009. And I had been a personal trainer, yoga teacher for a couple of years. I was working at a yoga studio that also had personal training. And I was basically the second in command there. And, the owner had a lot of trust in me. I had a big following. I had a full, personal training roster. But the relationship with that owner it got to a point where I was like, I'm not going to grow here anymore. And we started to just butt heads about different things. And, I started to see like, man, this really isn't a healthy place for me to stay. So, my wife, we weren't married, but I was dating my current wife at the time. And she was like, oh, you could totally do your own thing. And I was like, what? Like,
That's a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
No
She's like,
pressure.
oh, yeah. And I was like, what? So she had more confidence in me than I had in myself. But I also had one particular client who had gotten amazing results. She had like lost 50 pounds working with me, and just she transformed her life. And she gave me credit for that. Obviously it was like the work that she did, but
Sure.
she was like, look, I'll invest to have you open your own place. And I was like, wow, okay. So I guess I need to do this,
No excuses now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was tough, man. I struggled. I struggled in that, especially in the first like 6 months. But then I got a business mentor. I started to leverage things like Groupon. Back in the day, that was a big deal especially for like brick and mortar businesses.
Oh yeah.
And was able to get the business to a point where it could really like sustain me. And soon after we had our first child. He was born in 2012. So it was a few years after I started. It was like year 3 of the studio. So that was really like my first foray into entrepreneurship. But it wasn't amazing because I had to work a lot. I had no idea how to like build a team. Acquisition was up and down, right? So I made it work for our family, but it was like a small operation, heavily dependent on me, and I just got burnt out. So, in 2016, I actually sold it for a very meager, I think it was 10 grand, just so the community could continue. And then kind of moved into the online space, which is where you and I met.
Yeah. So when you transition into like the online space, I'm sure there was probably a good amount of conversations you and your wife had at that time. And you had a kid at that point too, right? When you sold it?
Yeah, we had, so I sold the studio. It was like January, February of 2016. So we
Okay.
actually had two. We had 2 out of our 3 at the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How was it? Because I mean, it's really interesting to me, like, because when I decided to go into entrepreneurship, I already, I was married, I already had kids, like,
Yeah.
was already working in a career, and I kind of, to a certain extent, was already trying to learn a little bit about how to balance at least like career stuff with family.
Mhm.
But you had your family and kind of built your family while you were running the business. Like
Yeah.
how did that go? Like how were the conversations around, hey, I need you to help me at midnight, like wipe this baby's butt, but
Yeah.
you also need to be at the studio at 5 in the morning to do whatever it is that you need to do, right? Like how did you and your wife kind of balance that out when you were having
Mhm.
your kids?
Yeah, so it wasn't easy from an energy standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but the my wife and I have always been like an amazing team, especially when it comes to the kids. So that piece wasn't that hard, honestly, and she bounced kind of between working part-time and full-time, but we both were able to work our schedules to where it was like, okay. I'm gonna watch the kids from this time to this time and then hand them off to her. Like we didn't really put ourselves in a position where we needed much outside help. There was, some outside help, and we lived with our friends for a while, which is a whole other story. We had bought a house together with some friends, which was a really cool setup for that phase because like we could also help each other with childcare and stuff. But
Yeah.
for us, we just kind of figured it out. It was like, okay, I don't totally remember my schedule, but I want to say it was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday were like my 12-hour days at the studio, and I was still there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but they were shorter days.
Okay.
So it was intense in those early years, but we just made it work, and we did well as a team, my wife and I.
Yeah. Well, when you transitioned over to working in like the online space, I'm
Hmm.
sure that was like a big change from being like a business owner to working for other people. Like, how did that go? Like, what was that
Yeah,
experience like?
Yeah, well, I'll add this little piece in. So once I sold the studio, the plan was, I had been business coaching a client who was based out in Oregon.
Hmm.
And the plan was I was selling the studio. I was going to go out there with my family and run that business. Well, 8 weeks before we were set to move, they fired me, right?
Hmm.
As they should have. It wasn't the right setup. It just wasn't the right thing for either party, right?
Yeah.
So here I am. We had sold the house to the friends that we were, in partnership in that house, right? So we had nowhere to go. I didn't know what I was gonna do for work, and I had like 8 weeks to figure it out. So, I ended up like doing some sales for an online wellness program that I knew I had gone through the program and stuff. I did that, but then I got into Facebook advertising, which was like
Mm.
kind of another pivotal moment, I would say, for me in terms of moving into a next phase of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think once you know and learn how to acquire customers, or
Hmm.
at the very least, like leads
Yeah,
online, I think
yeah,
that's when a lot of things kind of change, like
totally.
that's when I feel like confidence definitely gets boosted a lot when you know how to do that. Because I mean, if you know how to do it well once, as long as you don't do anything crazy or you didn't just get lucky, like you can kind of repeat that process again. And I feel like for the next role that you took in the online space, like knowing that was probably really important because I'm familiar with the company that you were working at because I think that's how I like kind of at least crossed paths with you a couple of times.
Yeah.
Um, like I'm sure that experience kind of lent itself to being able to at least move into that field, right?
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was my foray into the online space was understanding digital marketing.
Yeah.
And I ran, Facebook ads for some businesses for a while, but then went through a program to see, okay, how can I grow this agency
Mm,
that I had? And then I was like, wait a minute, I was in the program and coaching other people in the program. And I'm like, man, I'm really a coach. I'm not a media buyer. Like I
mm,
can buy media with some success, but like my calling is more of this coaching thing. Like I had always done that on some level, whether it was sports, teaching drum lessons, yoga, personal training. Like there was always that coach aspect to it. So yeah, went through that program, but then ended up coaching in that program, which is how you and I eventually crossed paths.
yeah. Yeah. Well, during this time, like when you obviously had the kids at home and you had
Hmm.
your spouse, like there was a lot of things kind of transitioning. Um, I know at least with me, uh, everybody's wife is different. So I think some entrepreneurs have wives that are either blind faith, like just super supportive, they don't really know or care too much about entrepreneurship, but they're just going to have that faith that things are going to be okay. I feel like that's rare. And then you have the other type of wife who's like, okay, um, I am concerned, uh, a little nervous because I'm not entrepreneurial at all,
Hmm.
but I know that this is what they want to do, so I'm going to do what I can to support. It sounds like your wife was like kind of at least somewhat entrepreneurial this during this time period, but during this time when you were kind of making these different transitions, like what were the conversations you guys were having, right? Because it's not like you're a single guy and in your
Hmm.
20s and it's like I can just find what I'm passionate about and kind of do different things. Like once you have obligations, not like a car payment or a house payment, but like
Yeah, yeah.
people you need to feed, and like diapers you need to buy and sports teams you have to drive your kids to and all that stuff. Like there's a lot of things that kind of go into how you balance out moving from one thing to the next. Like how did you and your wife like do that and what kind of conversations were you guys having at the time?
Yeah, so it's pretty fascinating to me because my wife, like for most of her life, she's a little different now, but for most of her life, it was very much an employee mindset, right? So she
Mm,
wants the stability, the predictability. I want to know what my paycheck's going to be, how much vacation time do I have. But with that said, whenever I had like an idea, like, hey, I'm going to start running Facebook ads, or there was never do you think, like, do you think you can do that? It was always
right.
like, okay, cool. And I think it's because she's very like solution focused.
Mm,
She basically feels like the two of us together, we can solve any problem that comes up, right?
yeah.
And that might mean in some phases she works more, and other phases she works less. But she's like, she doesn't care as long as we're on the same page and moving in the same direction, basically.
Yeah.
So there was there was never like resistance from her. Um, in fact, like I said before, oftentimes I felt like she was even more confident that I could figure out whatever I was planning to do than I was.
Hmm.
So, but
Yeah.
so that helps a lot, right? I didn't have to do any convincing if there was like a transition that was kind of in front of us.
Yeah. Well, one thing you said there I thought was interesting, was as long as we're kind of going in the same direction, you know.
Hmm.
And I feel like for entrepreneurs, especially, sometimes it's kind of difficult to know what direction you're going in.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that I'm going to do next? Is this thing going to work?
Hmm.
Sure, we have goals. Like, if this thing does work, this is where I'd like it to go.
Yeah.
But it's not as static as oh, I'm going to get a job at this level of a company and then move up to this and then move up to this. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're working towards being a VP of X, Y, and Z in 15 years, right? What did you guys do? I don't know if it was like spoken or unspoken, or maybe it's something where it's spoken and you guys have this conversation consistently to make sure that you guys are always on the same page about what direction you guys are going in.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say we've always been on the same page 100% of the time. In
I'd be
fact,
shocked if you did say that
yeah,
because
yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
no couple is probably like that. Yeah.
Right, right. And when I was at TF, I think I was of the mindset of like, I have to do, everything I can for these clients in this company. And I just was not in a good headspace while I was there.
Mm,
I like did a lot of damage to myself and even my relationship with my wife because like I was always plugged in. I was always responding to messages and I just didn't do well with boundaries there, right?
yeah.
So we were not on the same page when I was there. And, I shared this with you earlier, but there was basically a moment one day I sat down on the couch and the company was putting pressure on me to move my family to Nashville. And I needed to give them a date of when I was going to move. And, I brought it up again. We had talked about it, my wife and I, but I brought it up again. And she just looked at me and she said, when you're here, you're not even here.
That's
And I
tough.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like a throat punch,
Mm,
because I wanted to be like, there's nothing that I want more than to be a great husband, a great dad, all of that. And it was like, man, I am like so far off. I'm so missing the mark here that I need to do something like major. And I
yeah.
just looked at her and I said, I hear you. You're right. And that needs to change now. I'm going to put in my notice tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, you know, went through that process. I didn't know what I was going to do next.
You just knew it couldn't be that anymore.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
But I also knew, okay, I've seen 1,000 clients come through this program. I have a great reputation. People seem to really connect with me and trust me. So I'm going to figure this out. So, I won't go too far down, but before I stepped out on my own again, I actually worked in a COO position for about 6 months, which was,
Mm,
not a great fit, but I think it was good as a transition because I just didn't know what I wanted to do or what I should do next.
yeah.
So, to come back to your point, that was a phase of there's probably a good year and a half where we were not on the same page and we just weren't having conversations about it. It was just a total disconnect.
Yeah. How old are your kids at that point?
So that was 2019. So I had a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, basically.
Okay, got it. I feel like around 7 is when they start getting kind of curious, you
Yeah.
know? Um, did that ever get brought up with the kids at all? Like, I know for me, my kids, I think for a long time, and even today, probably if I asked them what I did, I think they'd not be able to give a great answer, you know?
Yeah.
But like, did that ever get brought up with the kids at all in terms of like, because I'm sure they notice other things like whether you were traveling or not, or working certain hours or not, or stressed out or not. Like, did any of that stuff ever get brought up, or did you guys, like kind of not like, I hate to say the word shelter kids from anything because I don't think we're ever trying to purposely hide anything from the kids.
Right.
It's more just like it's not anything for them to worry about or for us to talk to them about it because it's not their problem or you know
Yeah, it
whatever.
didn't really come up with the kids, and I look at it more as like compartmentalizing.
Mm,
And now that they're older, we'll have like family discussions, and listen to their opinions and those kinds of things. But they know that ultimately, like mom and pop are gonna make the decisions for our family. But we also want them to know that we are listening to their feedback and input and helping them with that kind of those situations just as they move into later years in their life too. But at that point, no, they didn't. I don't think they really knew what was going on.
yeah. Well, after the COO stint that you did, is
Uh-huh.
that kind of when you started, or at least started the workings of the company that you have now?
Yeah. So as I was kind of winding down that role, I was just thinking about like, okay, after seeing 1,000 clients in the online space, what is the common missing piece? Like, what are they not, what
Mm,
are owners not getting help with? And the big thing that I came to initially was they really don't know how to lead and how to get their business to support the life they want. Right? A lot of it is like
yeah.
grind, market, make sales, like make as much money as you possibly can. But it's like, okay, well then what? Right. And we've now, after years of being in the high ticket space, we've seen all the fallout of that, right? It's like so many people now going like, oh yeah, I went to, 500K a month and then, I realized that's not what I wanted. Um, so
Right.
I saw that gap and I launched what I called the empowered CEO. So that was the first iteration of this current business.
Yeah. Well, you were going through that process, and I kind of went through this recently too. And it's funny, the story that you mentioned a minute ago about how your wife said, like, you're kind of not here when you're
Mhm.
here, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and you know this story, I think I've told you too before, but when my company failed, like it's been about 2.5 years now almost. That it hurt a lot because
Mhm.
I had been running that company for almost a decade at that point, and I started when I was pretty young, and so it's kind of all I knew, you know.
Mhm.
Like I don't really know who I am without this, right?
Yeah.
And when it was over and it was done, and a little time had gone by, and I kind of did what you did when it shut down, and I started doing like some consulting and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, I remember overhearing my wife having a conversation with her sister, and she and we'd all been close because I met my wife like first day of college. So like I have known her sister, who's only a couple years older than her, since she was a sophomore, and her
Yeah.
younger sister, she was like a sophomore in high school.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember she told me after the call, like my wife told me after this call, when they were talking about the business closing and stuff, my sister-in-law said something to the effect of like, oh, well, maybe now Chris, who's her husband, will get to know like the real Jake, you know? And it was like, that hurt because it almost felt like, well, it hurt, I think, for two reasons. One, I was like, I hate that I was like this different person to them, you know, like from
Yeah.
before I started the company to when I was running it. But the other thing, and I think this was probably the more painful thing, was I don't know how to get back to that person. Like, I don't know who that guy was, you know, like
Mhm.
I had to figure out like who was that person before I kind of let everything go and was just like, the business is me. I am the business. Like,
Yeah.
you know, this like unhealthy relationship I think a lot of people have with their company.
Mhm.
Um, and it was, you know, it was tough to kind of figure that out. But I think for you, the same as me, like, I think taking the time after hearing something like that from your spouse
Mhm.
and really digesting it is important because you have to remember, like, when you're running a business, and I'm sure you uh, can attest to this, it's like we can say all we want that we are solo founders and I'm starting this company, or this person is my business partner, you know, this other person is my business partner. But like, if you're married, like that spouse is on, like, they're in the passenger seat too. Like they're in the
Mhm.
car, you
Mhm.
know? I mean, they're seeing you drive the wrong way down the road
Yeah.
or the right way down the road or stopping the car or going 120 miles an hour when you probably shouldn't be. Like it's not like they're sitting outside or waiting for you to call. Like in terms of the business sense, like they're in the same car as you. And just like checking in and hearing about what they say, because it's not like there wasn't times before that my wife didn't bring it up,
Right.
you know. But I think when you're in it and you're working on something, you kind of always make an excuse of it'll be worth it, or it's just like this right now, or let me just finish this thing or do this thing and it'll be better next week or next month or next year. And that doesn't really ever come because it's never the thing. It's always you, really. Like you could always find, and I'm sure you've met people like this before where and I meet a lot of people like this, and because we're in the online space, we probably meet people like this more often than not, who it's like, oh, if I get to 25K a month, it'll be better. And then
Yep.
if I just get to 50K, like then they hit 25K and they're like, well, if I just get to 50K a month, it'll be better. And then 100 and then 150. And it's like, yeah, at some point you just kind of stop and ask yourself, like, when is, like, I'm not saying you don't want to keep getting more, but
You
is
might
the problem really that you
not want
don't
more.
have more, or is the problem really that you don't feel like you'll ever have enough or something, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. So when you started Empowered CEO and started going through that, like, how did you find people resonated with that message, I guess, you know? Because I know you went through a lot of that stuff and
Yeah.
you learned from it and met a lot of other founders who were going through different things. Like, how did you, like, how receptive were entrepreneurs to kind of hearing the message that you had for them about all of these different things?
Yeah. So surprisingly to me anyway, within 6 to 8 weeks of me, I used Facebook, like just my organic reach, because I knew my network there was who I wanted to serve. And after six
Mhm.
to eight weeks of just posting consistently, um, I had enough clients to like have a
Yeah.
viable offer. I want to say it was like 8 to 10 at that point. And so, it's like, okay, cool. I think that had me doing around 20, 25K in the first couple months of business. And for me, in that phase, I was like, that's perfect. Simple
Yeah.
business, simple offer, like our family can do just fine on that. So that was that. But I'll add in too. I think one of the most powerful parts of that experience of launching Empowered CEO was my wife came to me and she was like, "Hey, now that you're doing your own thing, do you think you could take Wednesdays off and watch Gavin, who's
Mhm.
our youngest?" And I was like, yeah, I mean, I can do whatever I want, and so I blocked out Wednesdays because she was taking the two older boys to a co-op. So I was working, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and not even full days. I had a handful of clients, um, and had that experience for a while. And then I was looking at my schedule at one point and I said, could I get what I need to get done in, 3.5 days? So started ending Fridays at like noon, and I won't go through the whole thing, but that process of saying, all right, I can run this business, but I'm only allowing X amount of time for me to run the business was one of the
Yeah.
most powerful experiences I've ever had.
How did you convince yourself to do that? Like, what was, because I mean, I think a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, until they've, because I think it happens one of two ways. You either are very, very intentional
Hmm.
about building a company that allows you to do that,
Hmm.
which means you probably had some experience in the past that leads you to wanting that. Or, like in your situation, getting asked, like, hey, and just not wanting to say no, right? Because you have a spouse and you don't want to let them down. And
Hmm.
either recently or over the years, they've probably, at least to a small extent, made some sacrifices for you.
Yeah.
And so now you kind of have to make it work. But it's still from a mindset perspective, I feel like most entrepreneurs that I know would have a really hard time saying, I mean, we work with one now who I think if we asked him, it's like, hey, we don't want you to work this day of the week, he'd be like, I don't think I can physically or emotionally do that
Yeah.
well, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not his fault. I don't think
Yeah.
it's really any entrepreneur's fault, but what are some of the things that you were thinking at that time to try to make it work for you, you know?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things, and I love the question because if people are listening to it, I when I say it, it can sound as easy as like, oh, I'm just going to decide this thing and then it just happens. Well, there are the context of it is I had that experience at TF of working, 50, 60 hours, being available on the weekends, always responding, and it just blew out my nervous system and also like that was my fault. I have no one else to blame in that situation other than me. Like I chose to do that, right? But
Yeah.
I let my family down and I blew myself out. So I had that experience. I was, quote unquote older, right? So I think that helps in a way because for me, it wasn't like, how can I build this, multi seven figure business? And like, I didn't
Yeah.
have that thing, and I think younger entrepreneurs, not again, I'm generalizing, but I think a lot of younger entrepreneurs want to build the big business to prove something to someone, whether it's themselves or their parents or whoever, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
have that piece, which I think was helpful. So I had kind of the bad experience at a company, blew myself out, let my family down. And then I have these amazing kids and wife. And my thing is like, the only reason I really want to, not only reason, the main reason I want this business to be successful is so I can spend a lot of time with them. We can have flexibility and we can have the kind of experiences we want. So I think all of those things combined made it really easy for me to keep the boundary of my time. And look, there were some phases where I would work a little bit more. There were other phases where I could work less, like if projects were happening or things like that. But in general, like I was able to stick to it, which, and I still do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when it comes to today, and I know we were joking about this a couple weeks ago when I asked you to come on here, and I mentioned one of the things I was going to ask you. I was like, normal routine and all that, because recently, and at the time of recording this, the reason I made this joke to Ben about like, doing an ice bath and stuff is that a couple weeks ago, some guy went viral about like his routine, and I just think it's hilarious because I think part of me, when I see stuff like that, and this is the reason why I wanted to start the podcast and just husband, father, founder stuff in general, is I feel like it's so different running a company when you have people relying on you than if you don't. Like your daily routine is different. Your weekly routine is different. The summers are different, because we have kids at home and all this other stuff. And even then within there's like this different dynamic of, does the wife work or does she not work? Like, how old are your kids? Are they teenagers? Or are they little kids? But when you're a single guy, like the guy who, went viral for his crazy morning routine, he doesn't have to worry about that stuff,
Yeah.
But for you, like when it comes to your, like, I hate to say routine, because I think when you're a husband and especially when you have kids, I think it's less about routine and more about like rhythm.
Yeah.
Rhythm feels more right to me because no day is exactly the same. Some days my kid might wake up at 6 and some days she might not wake up until I wake her up. Right. Some days my kids have a performance I got to go to. And then some days it's just a total day off because they have a teacher work day, whatever that means. And so there's no school that day. But for you and your wife, like what kind of rhythm, and let's start with you specifically right now.
Yeah.
Like what is your kind of like daily rhythm typically look like,
Yeah. So like what you kind of alluded to, every day can look a little different in terms of how it starts, right? Like as an example, today at 6 a.m., our 6-year-old comes into our room, gets in our bed, he's like 6.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So he's, he's laying there, he's like looking up at the ceiling, he's kind of moving around. So I just, I let him lay with my wife and I got up, went downstairs and, just started my day. Nothing crazy. So that's some days,
Yeah.
And in terms of morning routine, I mean, some days I'll meditate first thing in the morning. Some days I won't. I have coffee every morning with my wife. We sit down, we talk, we kind of, we'll talk about the day or places we need to be if there's stuff going on. Some days, she's running like what she calls her crazy ideas by me around where we could travel or, should we live in this state or, and so, every day can look a little different. But for me, what I've learned about myself is that starting my day with connection with my wife is like the most important.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's just me personally. So that might be like, hugging her for a few minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
That might be, just having a conversation. It might be going for a walk with her. But I know that that's like an anchor point for my day.
Yeah.
Well,
when I feel like to me doing that kind of reminds them that they're still the priority. Like whatever happens during the day, whether I have good meetings, bad meetings, a lot of meetings, little meetings, work trip coming up, whatever, that the first thing I'm going to do is not start working because then it kind of feels like that's the most important thing. Right.
Yeah.
Like to me, it almost is and I don't think there's anything wrong with one way or the other, but I feel like what you do when you first wake up, like actually do, not like mindlessly going and brushing your teeth, but like the first thing
Mhm.
you put thought and intention to in the morning, you probably put a very high level of value on that thing, right?
Yep.
And so for some people, it's dipping their face in a bucket of ice, and because their biggest priority is maybe the way they look or looking younger or whatever, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think when you're laying next to somebody every night, or kids come in, it's like reminding them that, like, hey, I might have work and all these other things, but like you're still the reason I do all that stuff,
Yep.
right? Because I know for me, and this is probably for you too, as much as I might lose, and I hate to say that word lose, but like you do kind of lose something a little bit when your brain has to at least partially always be on like taking care of the kids, and as opposed to like, oh, I the only thing I'm concerned about is going to the gym, building a business. Like if you're single, right? It's like that's different. Um, but I feel like that's magnified and made up for a ton by the amount of clarity you're forced to have when you have a wife and kids to take care of, and also the amount of motivation that you have when you have other people to take care of too. You know,
Mhm.
and a lot of that I think starts in the morning. So like when obviously in the middle of the day, it's almost impossible to know what a routine would look like there. But you did mention to me something interesting. I think it was a couple months ago when we met with one of our clients, and it was like an interesting tactic you use to like make sure you cut off at the end of the
Sure.
day or like on the weekends, right? So like, do you want to talk about that a little bit, and like where did that come from too? You know?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think all of us have challenges with our phones, right, in different
Yeah.
ways at different times. And so one of the things that I've started doing, because it's like, look, you can dig into psychology and trying to understand like why am I looking at my phone? That's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I'm like, look, is there a tactical thing I can do to like put my phone away and just focus on what I need to, which is my family, most likely.
Hmm.
So what I've started doing is, toward the end of the day, some days it might be 4 o'clock, some days it might be, 6 p.m. I'll shut off my phone, my like smartphone.
Yeah.
And we have what we call a house phone, which is just a flip phone. It doesn't have internet or anything, right? It's just a
Yeah.
phone. So at nights and on the weekends, I use that phone. Again, mostly like it's not, there might be a weekend where I have my phone on for whatever reason, like, right? But I do that practice. And especially, I'll tell you, having my smartphone off on the weekends, I feel so rejuvenated and recharged on Mondays. Like
Mm.
it's night and day versus if I
Yeah.
have it on over a weekend. So again, it's a simple tactical thing, but it's worked super well.
I do really like that point because I do think that sometimes people get way in the weeds about like, let me read another self-help book that changes my mindset around this or that. It's like, and I'm not saying those things aren't good. Like you
Uh-huh.
should dig into the reasons why you do certain things, but
Oh,
like there are a lot of tactical ways to change behavior too. Like for me, um, it's a little bit like I really like that idea, and I think I might start doing that on the weekends, especially because I do sometimes have a tendency to, even if you're not looking at it, just being knowing it's there makes you anxious enough to want to look, right?
exactly. Exactly.
Um, as opposed to if it's off or away and you need to pull out your computer to check something, you have to be very like very pointed and be doing it for very like most people aren't going to pull out their computer just to check. Like
Right.
they're
Right.
going to do it for something very specific, you know.
Yep.
Um, but what I do at the end of my day is um, really simple. It's just I'm the family cook.
Mm.
So if I don't like, and people want to eat by like
Yeah.
6 o'clock, you know, and so
Yep.
especially my 5-year-old, she really wants to eat by 6 o'clock. So if I don't get off of work at 5 and go inside and cook, then cooking's not happening, you know.
Yep.
And I think in the past, what I would have done is maybe been tempted to like order food. You know, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm not gonna be able to make it in. I'll just order something. But now what I do is like I deleted all the delivery apps for my
Mhm.
phone. So it's like,
Yeah.
even if I wanted to do that, I could not do that. And so it's really either two options. I either go in and cook dinner, or I have to ask my wife, and I do not want to do that. Like, I don't
Mm.
want to have to ask, like, she's probably already had to do a bunch of stuff, at work, because she works full time, and
Yeah.
like does a little bit more of the kids' responsibilities than me. But for me to then say like, hey, can you also cook dinner? It's like, that's, just the fact that I'd have to ask, I just avoid it, doing it
Yeah.
altogether.
Yep.
Um, but in terms of like today, because obviously you've learned a lot, like, going from owning a company back to working for somebody, back to owning a company. Like, let's talk a little bit about like, what is it you're doing today, like focus
Mhm.
on today from a work perspective, and then kind of dive into some of the other stuff now that your kids are a little bit older too.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, we have a company called Ethical Scaling,
Mm,
and for the last since July of 2020, it's that's when I shifted from doing Empowered CEO to what we call Raving Fan Formula. So it's really focused on client experience and how to reduce churn and turnover in online businesses, how to get more testimonials, how to get more referrals, and how to get your clients to stay for longer.
mm.
So, we do consulting around that. We do recruiting for client success, and we also have a software specific for client success as well.
Nice. Now that you're at this stage in life, right, where like you built a good name for yourself, and when I talk to other people in the online space and I mention your name, like they know who you are, or at least they know of you, which is that's a good spot to be. But one of the things that I've always struggled with as an entrepreneur, definitely when I was running my company, but still a little bit to this day, is sort of knowing what opportunities to take advantage of and which ones not to,
Mm.
because if you're good at what you do, you're and people know it, just that alone will get attention and people will come to you and want to work with you. But if you take that a step further, and inherently you're also an entrepreneur, like you are sort of driven to want to take advantage of a lot of those opportunities. What do you do? Like, is there some sort of like filtering mechanism, or like conversation in your head, or something that allows you to like kind of think about things in a different way than maybe you would have thought about like 10 years ago or something? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think some people, I'll say, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but I'll say some people struggle with this more than others, I think. Um,
Mm,
when it's like seeking a new opportunity because of like novelty, the dopamine, right? So
yeah.
for me personally, that I don't get a lot of that. I'm not like, oh, let me find a new opportunity to like get the rush of it. I
Okay, so
just,
that's me
again,
then.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But again, some people do struggle with that. So I think whether you do or don't experience that, to me, it's like, okay, what is exciting about this opportunity, right? So it's like basically starting with some questions. What's exciting about it? Um, what do I have going on already? And am I looking to get away from that? If it's yes, then why? Right?
Mm,
And again, like I think if you're asking yourself some coaching questions around opportunities, it might just help you go, you know what? I do really like the work I'm doing. I feel excitement around this other opportunity. Okay, cool. Is there a way where I can keep my good thing going, right? I had a coach who calls it like the steady, watery gig, right? So, how can I
yeah.
not blow up what's working and also have room to explore? Because I think it's
Yeah.
important, again, depending on your personality, it's important for some people to be able to have the space to explore versus like, no, this is working. I can't look at anything else right now. It's like, well, that doesn't sound like
Yeah.
fun? So I think it's just that. And being willing to say, all right, let me slow down here.
Mhm.
Because when a new
Yeah.
opportunity comes, and I have certainly experienced this, I think a lot of us feel like, oh, I've got to jump on that or it's not going to be there. And I'm
Like,
a
I'm gonna be
quick,
too late, a fear of
yeah,
missing out, like, oh, I'm gonna regret it one day. Like, yeah, that
yeah,
feeling. So
exactly. And I'm a quick decision maker, but I've also learned like, sometimes that's amazing, sometimes it's not amazing.
mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, so and again, you're never gonna know 100%, but it's like, okay, based on the knowledge I have and the experiences I've had, is this a situation for a quick decision, or do I need to slow down?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, they really don't have enough like patience
Mm-hmm.
and grace. And I don't mean like patience just with things like, oh, am I going to choose this opportunity or not? I mean, even just patience with themselves, because I know the times that I felt the most anxious. It was when I kind of felt like there was something I should be doing that I wasn't doing. But when I sat down and thought to myself, okay, what is it that I think I should be doing that I'm not doing?
Yeah.
And then when I write that stuff out, I realize none of this stuff has a deadline on it. Like, no, there's no timeline on any of these things. Like, I actually felt this way the other day because when I was putting together like the husband, father, founder stuff, I was feeling really anxious about, okay, I'm going to be interviewing Ben on Friday. Like, I got to get the newsletter stuff set up. I got this and that. I was so anxious. And I thought to myself, well, if I don't get it done by this day, who's going to fire me?
Yeah.
Like, who's going to get mad at me for that? Like, what monetary thing am I going to lose? What opportunity am I going to miss out on by shifting the due date for this thing from Friday to Monday? Like,
Yeah.
nothing. Nothing's going to happen, you know? Um, I just think a lot of times when we, especially like men and husbands, we just inherently, I think, put a lot of pressure on ourselves to
Yep.
perform, uh, especially when it comes to in public performance, you know, like,
Mhm.
uh, and it's really hard, I think, sometimes to be like really vulnerable and say, you know, what's going on and how are you feeling and all these different things, that you kind of get lost in this idea that it just needs to be better. Like, I just need to be better. And that might be healthy early on in your career.
Mhm.
But I think when you get to the point where you have uh, a family, especially, having that mentality is only going to feel, it's only going to make you always feel kind of like lacking. Like, I need to do more. And then you start using the excuse of, and this is what I did when I was running my company, was when there were times when I had to work late or work harder or get burned out, like, and I knew it was happening, but I was like, I got to do this stuff. I would use them as the reason. Like, I would be like, well, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for them. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for the kids. And, you know, if my wife ever got upset about it, which there were times that we had those conversations, it would always be, well, you can be mad at me for now, but you'll be happy later, you know? And it's like, and then as it gets longer, it's like it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is later is never going to come. Like, if you don't feel like enough is enough now, and there's not like something specific you're looking for, enough will never be enough. Um, Same thing with like morning routines that we were talking about earlier. Like, I think a lot of people put their pressure and sometimes feel guilt. Like, I used to feel a lot of guilt if I missed a workout, like, for a day. It's like, oh man, I didn't work out. Like, I'm lazy. And even if I didn't say that or really think it out loud, like, part of the self talk is like, I'm just lazy. I didn't find the time, or whatever. Or, oh man, I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. and do an ice bath this morning and journal before my kids woke up. It's like, why can't I get this routine worked out? But that's where like the grace, I think, comes in. It's like, not enough people, I feel like, have enough grace, especially when there's so much stuff going on. And I think a lot of that needs to start with the husband,
Yeah.
because if we don't have it for ourselves, it's going to be really hard to expect our wife to feel that way. Because if we have our standard up here they're going to feel guilt for not having it up there. Our kids are going to look at themselves and say like, ah, my standard needs to be up here too. And everybody's going to be looking around, and no one's going to feel good and no one's going to be happy, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, man, I was as you were talking, I was just thinking like what's one of the most powerful realizations I've had being a, you know, a dad, a founder, all of that. And I think it's a couple things. Being able to identify when I'm seeking externally for something that's actually internal, right?
Mm,
And what I mean is like if I'm seeking more or I've got to grow the business or I mean there might be a real good reason for that,
sure.
right? But it might also be because I think, oh, I'll be more valuable if my business is quote unquote bigger or, you know, and so understanding like what is it that's driving me right now? Is it some external thing? Is that really that important? Okay, is there something internally that I need to like sit with, focus on, be okay with? So there's that. And then, you know, I was walking with my wife yesterday, which is probably the best practice that
Oh,
we've
I love,
invented
yeah. We
in our
take a walk
marriage.
every day.
Yeah, we
Just
you and I talked
short
about that.
15-minute.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
it.
It's like a best practice for a marriage or relationship. But you know, I've been like prompting her with questions when we go on a walk. So I said, hey, you know, what are you most grateful for right now?
Mm,
Um, and she shared and you know, and she asked me, she said, what are you most grateful for? And I said, you know, I'm most grateful for having you and the boys and just being able to experience the regular day to day stuff with you guys,
mm,
you know, and it's a massive shift from where I was even, you know, a year and a half ago, right?
yeah,
Um, and so, you know, I'd say those two things. Understand what's driving you. Is it external? Is it internal? And like can you zoom out and just be like, man, it's amazing that I'm having this experience with these people and I'm telling them.
right. And that's a big thing I was going to say, because I think some entrepreneurs listening to this might hear that and say, oh, that's cheesy. Like, I can't tell my wife that. And I'll tell you, and this is the way for me. I don't know what your wife's is, but we went to like marriage counseling for the first time probably like 10 years ago or something.
Mm.
And the first thing that most marriage therapists do will go through like the love languages
Yeah.
exercise, right? And it was really interesting. Hers was words of affirmation, you know? And that's the one I am worst at. I'm terrible at complimenting people.
Yeah.
But mine was like acts of kindness, I think, and which is like, you know, people doing stuff for you. And she admittedly is like not great at that either, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the reason I bring that up is because even the love languages are not like this black or white thing. It's not like you're only this and nothing else. But like
Right.
I would encourage every man listening to this. I would bet if you go to your wife later today or tomorrow morning or whatever time you're listening to this and just be like, hey, like I was just really curious, like, what are you grateful for? They would be like, they wouldn't say that's so cheesy, like, oh, you know, like, and you guys, you don't have to tell your friends you asked your wife this. Just
Yeah.
ask her like these questions, because doing stuff like that to me, even if it's small, it are what we work on. And I think for every entrepreneur, it's probably a little different depending on how much you're letting the business impact your life. But I feel like for a lot of entrepreneurs, we take up a lot of the room in the relationship because things are changing a lot. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. There's travel or new sales or new marketing stuff that's launching and whatever. Like there's always something. And sometimes at least my wife has expressed that sometimes she felt this way where it's like she feels that she's the passenger,
Yep.
and I want her to feel like both of us are driving. We just, like you said, we're both driving in the same direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by just asking them simple questions like that, will let them know that, hey, even if I am working a lot or there's a lot of stuff going on, like I haven't forgot about what's important to you either, you know? So anyway, but I think that advice I think you gave is like perfect way to like kind of close this out. So, Ben, where can kind of people learn a little bit more about you and then maybe like reach out if they need some help with like customer success or just growing their business and making sure they're doing the right way? Like, how would people find out about that?
Yeah, sure. So we have a podcast as well, but if you go to ethicalscaling.com, that's our website. We've got background info, our book is there, so it's probably the simplest place.
Cool. Thanks, man. We really appreciate you having on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Husband Father Founder. If you got anything from the episode, do me a favor and like and subscribe. Also, share it with at least one friend. As husbands, fathers, and founders, we probably know a lot of other people who could benefit from really open, honest conversations about what it's like balancing those 3 full-time jobs. Also, if you're a founder who wants help balancing out their workload and figuring out a way that they can work themselves out of the day-to-day, from working 60-hour weeks to cutting that down drastically, go to jcare.com and subscribe to my newsletter. Every week, I give you really specific, actionable tips that you can use with your team in order to start decreasing the amount of time you're working in the business, increasing the amount of time you work on the business so you can save your time for what's really important back at home.